Hi, everybody. Another Thursday, beautiful night. I'm always curious about, strangely, the weather in Nashville, for example, or Arizona, or even in California. And sometimes, you think you look at a map and you notice how the angle of where you might be living is different than the one where, well, the weather would be different than the same angle in Europe, for example. Yeah, curiosity, I guess. I hope everyone is doing well. And I have a few questions here from Michel Laramie in Quebec. And let's see what he says. Could you please explain the connections between chakras and the aura? Are they the same thing? Is the global color of the aura the result of total color of all chakras? It's always been an interesting question. I've talked about this before, but perhaps it's important to talk about some of these things more often. When you're looking at chakras, for example, and you're noticing, if you can notice that where they are, and not only be involved with where books tell you they are, they're pretty well close to the same thing. But in books, they show you all kinds of colors. Well, by the way, they're not always the way they say they are. And this you would only know through experience. And that is a dilemma. Because if you start looking at the experience of some inner sight or clairvoyance, as you might already know, there are many levels of clairvoyance, and noticing the chakras themselves is a level of clairvoyance. The dilemma with that is that you can easily get hooked on this. That's why I sometimes I don't really talk about the colors that much, but if you think about frequency, literally, in our world, frequency is usually based on colors of within our visual capacity, usually relating to a rainbow, for example. It splits the colors, roughly about 7 different colors. And when you're looking at these colors, automatically you feed the way you think, feed information into and cultivate a way of thinking that relates to a visual capacity. In other words, you don't see gamma rays, you don't see television rays, you don't see X-rays, you don't see any microwave rays, this kind of thing. Because it's not really interesting to see those things, because we live in a culture that relates to various kinds of ways of seeing things. The culture is very demanding, and it also is very defining. So, in fact, people define auras as that which is kind of in a cloud of perception, one could say. It's like a frequency that is around a person. The level of that frequency, so many different ways of reading it. If you look, you can read about the ARE ways, the theosophical methods, other methods relating to mystical methods, many other kinds. Also, though, if you look at a clairvoyant that is deeply involved with not so much the interest of what your colors are, your emotions are, and therefore the kind of person you are based on the colors that are around you. Because in fact, that personally to me makes less sense than understanding what kinds of frequencies you're bringing into this world. So, okay, let's get back sort of to the question. Chakras are there. Those that are really majorly functional, usually the root, the gonad center, the solar plexus, and they link up to other centers, and they're trying to stimulate with energy, just cultivate an activity within an upper center that might be fruitfully enabling for that particular center. In other words, it'll turn it on a bit. And maybe another frequency will come in through that particular chakra. Okay, we're talking about chakras. All right. Energy is coming in through let's say those three lower centers. No one likes to hear that. Primarily, that's our average, if we're lucky. And energy is moving through, and we take that energy and we call it, I tried to come up with some things that we call it, pardon me, my glasses. We call it our intensity, the way we use the energy that's coming in, whether you use it for service or whether you're using it for survival, pleasing yourself all the time, just being valued as a person. You may not have been brought up and you didn't think you were very valued, then you would use energy to attempt to protect what you value within yourself, whatever that would be. Whether it be positive or negative, just doesn't matter. But the use of it will show a kind of expression, frequency, the use of it. Yes, you can have an energy coming through, and that energy coming through will allow you to do anything that you want with it because of our ability to allow ourselves to function. And we're meant to function and experience life and try to find a balance in life with that energy, whatever that frequency or those frequencies are, and how they fuse together. They come together for purposes. In the old traditions, Carl Jung talked quite a bit about a concept called individuation. Literally, that concept is to find a balance in life that includes your engagement with other levels, perhaps your mind, your intellect, making it broader than your emotional will would have it. And also the rights and wrongs and value systems that you have culturally or personally on a very subjective level, as well as how you utilize energy physically. So whatever that would mean. Not perfectly defined as a perfect person being individuated, sorry. But how you try to engage with life shows up in this field around you with the blending of these intensities. If you, for example, are angry a lot, that will show up in your field, energy field, which is often called aura. But the cultivation of it is your use of energy for the purpose of helping you to survive under the contexts that you believe are valuable, Um, your views about how the world is and how people are and all the rest of the stuff, and how they should be, how they shouldn't be, all that sort of stuff. Um, if you cry a lot, if you engage with loving, and you engage with compassion, if you engage with being kind and being gentle, uh, it shows up. But let's say, for example, a very willful energy, let's say will energy, not willful energy, of a frequency that you're not used to in this life, enters in to these planes, and you then initially can't handle it very well. Your intensity, and you might have had 3 or 4 lives with it and had very uh, important things to do in that life relative to being a general or a strategist or a person who assessed and judged people, or a wonderful person you attempted to be. Just depends how you used it, that energy coming into you. And then over a number of lives, you get to the point where you notice that you have reflex reactions that might have been in your solar plexus, for example. And if it were that way, you might have a will within you to say no to everything. It's just a use of energy. Or you might have a will in you to say, I want to say no to this, but maybe I'd like to learn more about it. I'd like to explore it, find out for myself whether it can be workable. And I have to be careful because I will be very defensive about something that would be different than what I would have. That would be a will, kind of a will energy. And as soon as, if I can find that aspect in that myself, if it were me, then I would attempt to possibly adjust it a little bit so I could move forward a little bit. But it would be very difficult because you would be using that will to protect levels of vulnerability that may be there, but you don't quite see them often enough. And when you do, you have a quick response to them so that you can protect whatever it is you think you need to protect. Or if you were protecting the way you think personally, and this goes for everybody, I'm not talking to Michelle here, I'm talking to us all, then you would have that aspect in you, that will aspect that would want to bring attention to the engagement that you have with the way you think. And that is in all of us, by the way. Whether you have a will frequency, chances are you do, or a more loving frequency, or in scientifically oriented frequency, that will aspect is very protective. And it should be. That's why there has to be a balance. But that may show up as some color that someone sees, and it looks to be, according to their color scheme, table of what is, this color, therefore that color means this. And it may not be that way in that individual at all. However, it's based on a schema, a table of what this means versus that means. All of you out there, including myself, have this kind of table internally or on where about you take a look at things and you evaluate based on a table that lies within. That table is related to what you've already made sense of. It's not perfect. It's neither good or bad, right or wrong. It's just a bloody table. That's an annoying statement to make. So, what can I say? I apologize for that statement. But it is a table. And then how do you get to the point where you can broaden that table? Broaden it out past what you've already made up your mind about. And in fact, then allow yourself to gain access to another aspect of will, which is curious about how you function in the world. And as soon as you start doing that, then other chakras start to open differently. They open not in protection only, but it includes protection of the individual in our world, root, gonad, solar plexus, in relationship to a personality, but also into an inquiry, into something which is really akin to, in some ways, a scientific exploration. But the exploration is the exploration into an inner universal aspect, whatever you want to call it. I like the idea of, personally, engaging and not throwing anything out. You look, you're trying to engage experientially, you begin to relate slightly different in some of the stuff that I've been attempting to put forward as you do some of these exercises, as some have done, and changes begin to occur. You begin in your perception. You perceive differently within. That brings to bear a self-protective engagement, which is natural and normal in all of us. We get concerned. What is that? Oh, what's that? What is this other thing? And then comes in this personalization, which it must be this, it must be that, it must be this, it must be that. Now that shows up in the aura. But it's energy coming in through those chakras that is used to create an aura, which in fact can be changed many times, depending on what's going on in a person's life and in a person's inner personality's exploration. Very fascinating question, because we are energy beings. And this is like, for example, let me think. If you light a match or a candle, what you see is the candle. You can maybe see a little bit of heat wave coming off the candle, depending on whether you're in a cold room or a hot room. But also, if you put your hand above the candle, even a foot, you can feel the heat rising. It's kind of an energetic form around the candle. It's maybe not a perfect way of explaining it, but the candle itself literally is energized by that flame. That flame is kind of related directly to an opening of a certain kind of, not chakra, one would say, but heat in the visual perception world that we can see, and we call it a flame. So anything that's burning like that, we call it a flame. So, how about if you met in your inner worlds, being conscious in it, you met a being that was on fire? Oh, we have a table for that, right? In fact, you may have a table for that, but that table may not be what this being would be. That being may be a form that relates to another state that has nothing to do with concepts that we have here. Such a being may actually exist. However, our visualization of this kind of a being in our world naturally wouldn't be there, because that being could only be seen if the form itself, the personality form itself, was absolutely quiet and engaging in a non personalized mode. And that would be very interesting. You may be able to gain access then to other states of existence, perhaps. And those are really basically ideas that may come from Eastern traditions, as well as some in the West. So the concept of an aura is an energetic concept relative to the use of levels of frequencies that you might use here. But unfortunately, the only way that we can actually perceive those is if we are slightly clairvoyant, and also if we attempt to allow ourselves to broaden out our tables, the things we believe things must be if we see this versus that. This is very difficult for us to do, because once we grab onto something, we like to keep those things. It's like getting off at a bus stop when your destination is 100 miles from where that bus stop is. But the bus stop looks so good, and it gives you value, and it's legitimate value based on these planes. I don't know whether that actually helps you, Michelle, but it's an attempt to explain it nonetheless. I'm trying to explain it, and if I were explaining it to myself, I might use different symbolic reference if I was explaining it to, because we have a number of people that will be looking at this, and the clarity of it hopefully makes a little bit of sense. So I wish you well with that one. Thanks for asking. That's a good question. Here's another one from Michelle. You are talking a lot about the heart center, the chest, for many years. So it seems to me that the center is having a major role right now for everybody, without, of course, denying the importance of all others. Can you elaborate on this? Well, this is kind of complicated. Maybe it's too complicated for me. But as I talked about just a little while ago, the average person is at least attempting to use all three of the lower centers to function in life, and under all kinds of difficult circumstance, and doing well and not doing well, as all of us do. Sometimes we do well, sometimes we don't. And that heart center is really an interesting center, because It's kind of a key, and maybe I should start first talking about the brow center and the throat center, because those two centers are ones that are being stimulated now in our world so that the emotional center can broaden out and soften down at the same time. This is tremendously difficult to do. It's a bit like rubbing your belly and patting the top of your head at the same time. Some people can do it really easily because they've done it before in other lifetimes. But when your brow center is opening and your throat center is opening, based on energy coming from the root, gonad, or solar plexus, that's traditionally the way things have been set up, then these centers will have an effect, just a little effect, on the heart center. It will start to open that center, which begins immediately. If you remember some of the stuff I was talking about before, those gonad and solar plexus stimulate the brow and the throat center, and somewhat at the top of the head as well, because that's part of the root construct at its highest relative point. Then this heart center, when it starts to open, literally stimulates the solar plexus, root and gonad center, and how they've been able to combine a bit, and starts to open the chest area in the lower area as well, which stimulates again all of the organizational rules and regulations of how to be a particular person named so-and-so, because of their vast experience over the number of years they've been functional. And nothing in there is, oh boy, anything but a three-dimensional form. Really more, but let's stick with three first. Those forms are external. All your experiences are external, but linked to the center that was used at the time within your lifetime to enable you to survive or function and engage in life with energy so that you could be okay, relatively speaking, and polite, relatively speaking. So, in fact, strange as it sounds, those forms are there oscillating, the same as the question that I had a number of weeks ago about an engagement with after this life, some of those very valued people in our world that we kind of think are really able left emotional aspects like bodies, like energy form of their capacity, related to their capacity, still oscillating in the whole of humanity, affecting humanity literally by that oscillation. So a Krishna, a Christ, a Buddha, or whoever, someone living in a cave that was lit up by inner growing and not engaged with life necessarily in the world. Because the influence of energy on them, they wanted just to hide there so that no energy affected them. Of course, the energy of the species energy of the species affected them. However, they engaged the best they could and grew the best they could. And when they passed, when they died, physically here, emotionally, and if they were able to attain a mental plane, that oscillation would occur because it's part of a system that relates to them. And they have been here, partaking in life at this level. And you could say that they came here, and if they grew internally, there was an automatic influence of their growth on these planes. Short aside. If someone wanted to help you to grow, with all the amounts of people who may listen, you would have to wonder whether you really wanted that to happen, because you wouldn't know exactly what that would mean. And if you did, you would want to protect the thing that you had. You believed what was very vital. And that was us, our personalities. Why not? We want to do that because that's our nature. And how we use them and how we are valued by it, according to us and according to others. Not the same evaluation trait, maybe, but it could be. And these are relative and flexible. Then all of a sudden, what do you have? You have there a movement to help and a movement to push away the help. This is the nature of how we function. You can prove this to yourself by attempting to understand you better. You'll see it, and you'll see the vulnerability that you have. And that vulnerability in itself, literally, is akin to kind of adjusting or shifting something, or observing something within for the first time. So if this heart center starts opening, it affects the brow and the throat center, but it also affects the root, the gonad, and solar plexus centers. It stretches them a bit so that more energy can come in, and then you can then perhaps use some of the energy exercises to try and help the lower centers not to have as much pressure on them as they would have if you didn't redirect something upward to help something open upwardly and downwardly, and trying to also ask for healing, as someone said in one of their questions. It is very interesting to engage with that heart center, because some of the first symptomology is something like this. You'll have a feeling as if you're not really yourself. What does that mean? It means that you are noticing you as not you. You're observing something that you didn't observe before. It's like a funny, empty feeling. But this can happen from an upper center starting to turn on, like a throat center, a brow center, even a crown center, or a heart center. It's encouraging the stabilization centers on these planes to begin to observe what is occurring on these planes little by little, gently. And it makes you feel like as if your personality is not necessarily yours. It's a weird feeling. Heart center in that way is extremely helpful to allowing you to notice the energy that does come through you inadvertently every single day of your life. Comes through. Sometimes you grab onto it and hold it. Sometimes it makes you feel really great and good. Sometimes it makes you feel really weird and not comfortable. It can be emotional. It can be very physical. It can be very mental in the sense that your looking at things is suddenly bumped up. You see a little bit broader in your mind than you could before. You have an answer that you never had before. And then you will wonder about the answer, because that's the nature of how we've been trained, but only after you've used it. And you think that it's very valuable then. But this is normal for us. And you would dare not say that you have an answer in your head versus I have an answer. We use different pronouns because we're trained to think that everything in the universe is about us in a kind of a way. It doesn't mean it's real. It just means that's how we're trained. This is a very interesting question because if you're actually trying to explore internally, you'll have many perhaps concerns, perhaps thoughts about what's causing this, what's causing that. That's fascinating. Some people have attempted to keep a log. I did this for the first 10 or 20 years of when I was beginning back in the late 69, 70, 71. And I noticed some of the valuable things that occurred. I didn't have to keep a log, but it's always interesting if you're really looking at things and trying to understand your relationship with you. And also, you begin to realize that many people have experiences that are slightly different than yours. That's based on their subjectivity as well. How they see things, how the internal communication is usually that internal communication is not abrupt. Usually. Sometimes it can be. You may see something within you that is very clear to you, and you may not like it. That's pretty abrupt. I mean, about yourself. But that's not the reason for seeing those things. The reason for seeing them is so that you can know you different than anything else in you that isn't you. It sounds really weird, plainly talking. But in fact, it is true that other people affect you. Because those fields of energy are not only around the body, they're often called aura. Those fields of energy are interacting with us, you with others. You need to remember that one, as well as others with you. And so the old idea of your thoughts have wings, you might keep that in mind a little bit, but the more you grow, the more it becomes real. So it is important that you allow yourself to keep a balance. You have to survive here as well as in the inner worlds. So you're learning even there to broaden out some of the emotional or thought process or the sensate relationship that you have with your physical orientations, your physical body, because it can tell you an awful lot, not only about you, but about others eventually. And you have to know when to speak and when not to. And this is difficult to learn. And you don't speak to induce the importance that you might need personally because you're feeling vulnerable somehow. You try to soften that down. Oh, that's not as easy as one would think as well. But the heart center has a little clue in there. In the first openings of the heart center, it's as if you have no feeling at all. That's weird. And that sensate thing that we look for all the time, that feeling is moved out of the body a bit. It's about, you start to notice those centers or chakras or sephira. They're just names for this thing, or valves. And notice that they're real as opposed to theoretical. It's the difference. The theory part supersedes the real often because we do our research. We look, we read other books, we read about Einstein, we read about all kinds of things that have relevance and to our curiosity. And well, we should. But it doesn't mean that we know something. We know it here, we don't know it in here. And both are recommended because you begin to notice that there are some differences. And then you start asking yourself some of these questions. And you become curious, and you can become an explorer. But remember, exploration is based on perception. And then what you have on that little sidebar table that you carry with you all the time, as you express what you think you know and what you believe. And this is natural in our world. But keep in mind that that sidebar table has to allow itself to be more open. Otherwise, we can never allow a deeper level of engagement than what we already believe must be true. This is not so simple, but the Heart Center will try to help you to do that. Yes, you can have the Heart Center open on a personality level that gives you value as an individual. That's true, you can. But there is a deeper level of it. And it is allowed, and the same is true with the throat, the brow, and the crown, by the way. All of those centers can be open related to the personality. This is a dilemma, as a matter of fact, in that there has always been a natural concern on the deeper levels that individuals may gain access to the amount of sense of power that they have and have great difficulty getting out of that because our world is so youthful, young in its willingness to allow an entry into what may be more real than what we understand. It will always be there. We must always venture into an exploration of the universe. But the universe is much larger than what we can see and perceive currently. And science has taught us that, if anything, from at least the 17th century, somewhat before, with some ideas way back in the 500 BC rough area. But at the same time, we are young in our exploration. By gosh, we are fascinated by ourselves, though, being where we are. And that is legitimate. That's how we do things. We become that way. It's not negative, it's just part of how the species moves forward and doesn't. Both are possible. But also the inner worlds are important as well, because if our energy can be transmitted thousands of miles knowingly by some in a positive way, then we must be guarded somewhat within ourselves about our excitement and our capabilities and our thoughts around others and how we function and want others to function. Our thoughts are not perfect. Our views are not perfect. They're ruminations, and they are valued by us. And we hope that others can have similar ones because we know how right we are. And there is much to grow and broaden out in how we can help each other. And that is a key thing. The ability to help another to be as able as you are able in whatever it is that you do. That would be interesting. And a key way of looking at things. It generates an interesting way of looking. In the old traditions, often it was thought that the elderly could help the young. Well, the young may not want to be what the elderly might want them to be. And often that happens. But the same is true individually as we engage with each other. And that can be either funny or sad, one way or the other. But nonetheless, it's an aspect of being a human being. And we live in virtual worlds. In other words, we live in worlds related to our perceptive abilities and our understanding and our expression and how we would function and how we would want others to function with us. And the reverse, of course. So I hope those two, and that's part of the heart center's movement towards, but every center affects every other center. And there's a very slow process of development. But to have a heart center open, a brow, the throat, crown, solar plexus, or root, or a gonad center to open beyond the limitations of these planes would really be helpful to the planes themselves, the ones we live on. It's thought that it would increase the ability to evolve towards something that we're meant to evolve towards. And now, yes, of course, that's up for supposition. But at the same time, you realize how difficult it is to allow yourself to shift from whatever you believe or value in a kind of relative apex with respect to your own way of engaging with life. We don't accept things very quickly, very ably. We do look to find an excuse for not doing things that might shift or change our current engagement. This is not a negative thing at all. This is how we protect our relationship with ourselves. Probably a good reason for only living 100 plus years in a cycle if we're lucky, or if we're not lucky, as some would say. I hope this helps a bit in these two questions. Michelle likes to stretch me a little bit, and I'm always interested in what he comes up with. Thank you. I think what we'll do now, because it's about 10 minutes to, if I get into the next question, I won't be able to completely answer it. Although I did touch on a few things there that might give you some hints about questions you don't know about. I wish you well. We're now going to meditate for about an hour. And thanks to Marlene, and we'll set this up so that we can go ahead and do that. Have a good evening. So you can just begin to do the balancing and grounding on your own. And we'll see you on the weekend. Take care, everybody.